Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 776. 776. Thursday, May the 9th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and get to it. I guess the first thing we'll talk about is what happened yesterday with what happened in the House Judiciary Committee with old Nadler. Old Nadler was going to have the vote, the markup vote, to hold William Barr in contempt for not releasing the entire Mueller report completely, of course, which would be a violation of the law. We've talked about that before. But what happened there, just before, literally minutes before they had the vote, the White House went ahead and exerted, or invoked, I should say is the proper word, invoked executive privilege over the entire Mueller report, which pretty much takes care of everything, okay? Because that's not something that will really be, well, shouldn't be challenged to a higher court or go to the Supreme Court or anything like that. Of course, that doesn't mean Nadler won't try it. In fact, I fully expect that they're going to try to take it to court and challenge it and all sorts of things. But ultimately, once the president invokes executive privilege, that's pretty much it. That's a right that the executive branch has. And, of course, we saw Obama invoke executive privilege over 140 times. 140 times by the Obama administration. This is the first time that Trump has used the executive order, and he had to do it to protect his attorney general, because his attorney general is being viciously attacked for political reasons. Nadler is essentially wanting Barr to release parts of that report. I mean, 95% of it is there for Nadler to read if he would like to read it. And there's 5% there which has to protect innocents, people who were found having committed no crime, and therefore it's the law. You can't release that information. Nadler knows that. So in order for Barr to comply with Nadler, he would have to break the law, which he's not going to do. So, the timing was good, though. I like the way the White House did that, because they could have done it an hour before that or 2 hours before that, but they waited till like minutes before the hearing started, and then they invoked the executive privilege. Nadler obviously was pretty pissy about it, but he knows that there's really nothing he can do. Now, that doesn't mean he won't try to appeal it to the courts. He might even try to take it to the Supreme Court, for all I know. But believe me, I don't think the Supreme Court would hear the case, first of all, and even if they did, we'd probably be into certainly very late in this year, if not early into 2020, before that case would even be on the docket. So it's just political theater, and of course, for legal purposes, Trump essentially put it to bed, or the White House put it to bed by invoking executive privilege. So that pretty much puts it to bed, done, story over. But that doesn't mean the political, game is over. The political game will continue, and Barr knows this, the White House knows this. Then it's only going to further damage Democrats, Nadler, that committee, and anyone who goes along with him. I mean, it's a suicide mission for these guys, and I don't think that they realize it. Now, Nadler, of course, comes from a district that's like 99% Democrat, so this is what his constituents want to see. He'll face no personal retaliation for it from his voters, but certainly Democrats across the country who are in much tighter races, much more even districts, and his party as a whole will certainly face consequences for the juvenile, sophomoric, irrational, insane behavior of Jerry Nadler. The man is truly an idiot. Truly is. Now, since we talked about this story yesterday with Kathleen Kavalec, and keep in mind, this is not the first time that we'd heard about this situation with Kathleen Kavalec. Her name came up a long time ago, probably, I don't know how many months ago. It's been a long time ago, though. I remember talking about it, and it came up that she was in the mix, and that she had been somehow in the communication chain, and her name was on the list of people who they were going to interview. I assume that probably happened. That was when the Goodlatte Gowdy committee was going in the last Congress. Her name came up, and I assume that she probably testified in those hearings. We didn't see them. They weren't public, but obviously she testified. Now, I don't know if this came out in that testimony, or if this is something new. But it's not the first time her name has popped up, but it's the first time that we had learned about the specific content of this email and her actually initiating something, an electronic communication. I think before it was the fact that she would have been on the receiving end of some communications through the State Department, that she would have been someone of interest to interview. But this, what we learned yesterday, takes it to a much higher level. And these notes, I imagine that they're going to try to get their hands on these notes, because apparently in these notes, it definitively ties Hillary Clinton to Christopher Steele. And I'm thinking that what we must be talking about here is that either there is a communication between Hillary and Kavalec, where maybe Hillary is instructing Kavalec to talk to Steele, or maybe Kavalec talked to Steele and then she emailed Hillary Clinton. There's either a direct communication between Kathleen Kavalec and Hillary, or there's a direct communication between Hillary and Steele, or there is some sort of a conversation where Hillary is directing Kavalec to speak to Steele, or Hillary is directing maybe Steele to talk to Kavalec. So there's something going on in that deal, and supposedly there's notes that back this up. But just from what we learned yesterday, that tells us that it was Confusion GPS, Simpson and Frisch, who told the Clinton campaign, hey, you should talk to Steele. And in fact, Steele was actually being paid by the DNC. And of course, we know from Donna Brazil's book that essentially once Hillary won the nomination, she essentially assumed complete control of the DNC, particularly all of the financial matters. In other words, the payments, and payments were made to Steele. And it needs to be also something they were talking yesterday about the story I saw on Sean Hannity last night. They're saying, yeah, well, this, I think it was Lindsey Graham saying, yeah, well, we find out that Hillary is in the DNC essentially was paying Steele. Yes, but let's not forget, the FBI was also paying Steele. We learned that months ago. So the FBI was also paying Steele. So here you have the FBI and the Clinton campaign paying Christopher Steele, paying the same guy. And he's providing the opposition research to Hillary as a political matter, and then he's providing this exact same information to the FBI as a legal matter, as an investigative matter. And this is where the big problems are going to be for the FBI. And whether or not they can tie Hillary to that, I don't know. But I think eventually we are going to find direct evidence that Hillary Clinton was in some large part directing activities, and that she was the one that was directing how to move this information. She would know how to do that. If Hillary Clinton was directing people, oh, you need to do this, you need to pass it on to this person, and this person will give it to this person, and this person will give it to this person, as we saw with Shearer giving his dossier to Blumenthal handing it off to Weiner handing it off to Steele giving it to the FBI, and then passing it along to Victoria Nuland, and on and on. So if Hillary was directing any of the movement of any of these communications, that ties her directly to the plot, and I'm sure that we're eventually going to get there. It's just a matter of time, and hopefully I don't think it'll be that much longer. But this is certainly a move in the right direction to smoking out the rotten Reverend Clinton and her role in this. Now, I did a little bit of background research on Kavalec, and I stumbled onto two things that might be of some interest to you. The first is that Kathleen Kavalec is a Hillary Rotten Clinton donor. She donated to the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. So Kavalec is a Hillary Clinton donor. Meaning she wasn't an impartial, unbiased person in the chain of communications here. She clearly has a bias and a preference toward Hillary Clinton. But then it goes one step farther. As I'm digging through some information on Kavalec, I discover a page from one of the WikiLeaks releases. And this particular page is a page that is showing a communication, an email communication, State Department email communication from Hillary's lawyer, Cheryl, what's her name? And basically what this is it is a directive for the Right Reverend Clinton, for a group of people who are eligible or seeking or are going to be receiving promotions within the State Department. Cheryl Mills. So Cheryl Mills writing this State Department communication addressed to the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and there's no real explanation, just a title for what it is, and it's for essentially promotions. People in the State Department who are either due or expecting or for whatever reason getting promotions. On that list of people, and this is from 2011, on that list of people from 2011, State Department communication, Cheryl Mills to Hillary Clinton, is the name Kathleen Ann Kavalec. So obviously in 2011, Kavalec was working in the Hillary Clinton State Department, and she received a promotion. Now, maybe she was just up for a promotion, maybe she did something to get that promotion, or maybe she was promoted to do her a favor, expecting some favor later on down the road in return. Maybe the relationship between Kavalec and Clinton is a close one. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's really hard to say. But certainly more needs to be looked at here to find out what the relationship is with Kathleen Kavalec and Hillary Clinton. Because obviously she's a Hillary Clinton donor. Obviously she was promoted by Hillary in 2011 in the State Department. And here we have her sending this email. And we don't know who all the people are she sent it to, but we know that they're fairly high-level players because of the sensitive nature of the communication and what it's about. It's about Christopher Steele, and she's alerting these people she's emailing to that he's got a deadline and that this needs to be made public, and that he's trying to encourage her to plead to her higher-ups to do something to get the dossier or the Steele material, whatever you want to call it, out there. This would make her certainly an active player in the plot to push the dossier. And it's hard to believe that she's just a person floating around there of the many thousands and thousands of people in the State Department. She would just happen to be in the email chain, and she would just happen to be a key person that you would go to who would have the type of influence that you would think, hey, if you go to this person, she can get it to the top people and they might be able to get this done. Someone directed Christopher Steele to Kavalec. I find it hard to believe that Christopher Steele would really know Kavalec. Now, maybe they've met through some other situation, but there's a lot of people in the State Department. She wasn't necessarily a household name. She's not necessarily a top-level diplomat or official. So you got to wonder, how did she end up in a meeting with Christopher Steele? Who arranged that? How did they come to meet? Why did Christopher Steele feel that she would be a person that he could go to in confidence, share this information, which at the time is considered, pretty secret information. It's what the CIA and the FBI and everybody else is using to run a frame-up on Trump, to run a counterintelligence investigation. So it's not like she was just some person who found herself in an email chain and just passed a message along. Clearly, she had to be a person of some significance or importance, and there had to be someone who would be able to connect Steele to her, unless they knew each other. But if Kavalec knows Clinton, and we can assume she certainly does, and Steele knows Kavalec, then that means possibly here you have Hillary knows that Kavalec knows Steele, and therefore that would then make it okay, and that would make her the perfect person for Steele to give this communication to move it through the State Department. And keep in mind, Hillary at this time is not the Secretary of State. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't still have her old connections at the State Department or any of the other agencies where she is familiar and knows these people. Like she knows John Brennan quite well. So, I assume Comey, she must know him, but I don't know if she likes Comey all that much, but I know that she knows John Brennan quite well. There's a lot that needs to be looked at in this communication, and we need to find out from Kathleen Kavalec. Questions that I would certainly have for her are, how well do you know Hillary Clinton personally? How well do you know her? How long have you known her? Did you communicate with her at any time during 2016? I would ask her about her relationship with Steele, how she knows Steele, if she ever met Steele before, who set up this meeting between her and Steele. Why did Steele feel that he could trust her with this type of information? What sort of what sort of level of security clearance does she have to be even handling such information? And what was the overall motive that she was using, that she would forward this information? Because ultimately, there's some liability here. If you're working at the State Department, somebody like Steele comes in your office and he says, I want you to try to get this pushed out into the public. Here's these this campaign I put together. Here's this information I put together, and I'd like to get this public, but the only way it's going to happen is if it goes through the State Department, but it needs to get to some higher ups who might be able to release this or something. And Steele didn't just go to anybody. There's some reason he went to Kavalec, some reason that he went to her. And so she needs to explain this entire scenario. And again, I know that she was on the list of people to be interviewed, but likely, I don't know if they asked her any of these questions, because they were likely, of course, according to Devin Nunes, they didn't know about this. So at that time, they probably did not know the right questions to ask. All they knew was that previously she had been part of an email chain where information had been going. But specifically this, or meeting with Christopher Steele, I don't believe they knew that, and very likely they never asked her anything about Christopher Steele or meeting with Christopher Steele. I don't know if they asked her about her relationship with Hillary Clinton or anything like that. Now, I would have to assume that since we know now about this document, it's heavily redacted. I have to assume that in the next couple of days or weeks, that Nunes and other people who are interested in this are going to probably get to view that in a skiff and maybe get to see unredacted or mostly unredacted, and they'll find out who these people were, who she was sending this to. And possibly in her notes, they'll try to get those. But ultimately, I would think that she is now certainly going to show up on the radar screen, and would certainly be a person of interest that you would want to talk to find out exactly why Christopher Steele would have so much confidence in her, and why someone like her would be used to try to move this dossier to the higher-ups of the State Department or maybe another department of the government for the purpose of getting it released, because after all, there was a deadline. So we'll keep following up on this. I'm sure there'll be more to come in the days ahead. Well, the Gateway Pundit is writing today that a newly unsealed document reveals that the FBI opened the obstruction of justice case against President Trump before Special Counsel Mueller was appointed to investigate Russia's interference in the 2016 election, and in fact, January 2017. Now, that is very interesting. That's the first I've heard of a date that old. Now, we had already learned, just literally 2 weeks ago maybe, that McCabe opened the obstruction of justice case against Trump right after Comey was fired. So that would have been May the 9th is when he was fired. So somewhere in the days after, May 10th, May 11th, May 12th, somewhere there, McCabe opened up an obstruction of justice case. But this story in the Gateway Pundit is citing that this, President for such a yeah, but this is saying, and this is not talking about the collusion situation or the collusion investigation or anything like that. This is talking about obstruction. And this story is saying that there's a newly unsealed document that reveals that the FBI opened the obstruction of justice case against President Trump, in January of 2017. January of 2017. what would have been the reason for obstruction in January 2017? That was 4 months before Comey was fired. So it could only be something having to do with Michael Flynn. So were they opening up an obstruction case against Trump in the case of Michael Flynn because Trump had asked Comey to go easy on Flynn because he's a nice guy? Is that what we're talking about? And if so, that means that Comey opened up an obstruction case against Trump before McCabe. But if Comey opened an obstruction case against Trump in 2017, why would McCabe open one in May? Maybe because they were on two different issues. McCabe opened his case based on Comey's firing, and we can only assume that the original case, January 27th, would have been open, could only be on Flynn. That's the only other thing I can think of. Man, oh man. They eventually got to get to the bottom of this, and I'm sure Horowitz or Barr or one of them will. Somebody will. This stuff, there's documents. I mean, you can't, if you open a case of obstruction, it's an official case of obstruction. There's absolutely, documents. When you open a case, there's documents. Okay, so I'm sure that we'll eventually get to the bottom of this and find out exactly what went on here. My goodness. But there's something more important about this, and it's not good for Rodenstein. Now, I believe that Rodenstein probably was turned. That's my guess. How good of a witness he's going to be, how much he's willing to tell, I don't know. But I believe that Rodenstein has probably been turned. That's just a guess. And that's good for Rodenstein because essentially when we learn this, what we're learning here from the Gateway Pundit about this obstruction case being opened in January 2017, that would mean that Rodenstein essentially and other top FBI officials and DOJ officials as well lied numerous times to the president and to Congress because he asked, and in fact he even was told by Comey 3 times before Comey's firing that he was not under investigation. Comey told Congress he was not under investigation. McCabe told Congress he was not under investigation. I think Loretta Lynch said that that he was not under investigation. Possibly even Yates. So you have multiple FBI and DOJ officials, including Rodenstein, who I know for a fact was asked, and he said no. So all these people saying that Trump was not under investigation, but if this Gateway Pundit story is correct, and they opened an obstruction case in January of 2017, then they all lied based on these facts. Because the hearings that we're referring to for Rodenstein and these other DOJ and FBI officials occurred after the Comey firing. So maybe we'll get to the bottom of that, along with many, many other things. Okay, well, we have the wild-eyed commie, Ocasio-Cortez. Every time you think she can't get any stupider or say something even dumber, she, of course, proves that she's got a lot more in her. Let's put it that way. So it appears that she has just now recently discovered a garbage disposal. It appears that she's just discovered the garbage disposal, and she says that she flipped a switch and it made a noise that scared the daylights out of her. And so she's asking her Twitter followers for help in understanding the garbage disposal. I honestly don't know how to even retort to that. The garbage disposal's been around since 70s maybe? Long time. Find it hard to believe that she's never heard of or seen a garbage disposal before. But anyway, she's pretty dumb. So keep that in mind for Dumbass of the Week. Ocasio-Cortez discovers the garbage disposal on May the 8th, 2017. Probably an epic moment in her life, and it comes just a week after she discovers that plants actually grow up out of dirt and produce food. So she's getting smarter. She's getting smarter. In a few years, she'll catch up to the Neanderthals. So here's another story. We have the congressional investigators are now looking at a number of false statements made in the Mueller report, starting with the lies about Mifsud. Many lies in the Mueller report. There's different types of lies. One of the major types of lies that we have practiced by politicians and government bureaucrats is lies of omission. But Mueller was being paid a lot of money to do a thorough investigation and tell us what went down. To mislead us about individuals who are key, should have been key in that investigation, such as Glenn Simpson, Vesselnitskaya, Halper, Downer, Mifsud, to mislead us, and would certainly be one type of lie, but in this case, we're talking about completely misinforming us about Mifsud, not telling the truth about Mifsud, suggesting he's a Western, or he's a Russian agent, when in fact he's a Western intelligence operative, and it wouldn't take, with all the resources Mueller had, it wouldn't take him that long to figure that out, because there's probably documents within the FBI, probably the DOJ, CIA certainly, showing the relationship of Mifsud, or who Mifsud is. If he's a Russian agent, they certainly have a dossier on him, because he elbows with all kinds of Western folks, including his connections to the U.S. State Department. How would you not have a dossier on this guy if you suspect he's a Russian agent? So this is clearly disinformation, and it's purposeful by Uncle Bob the Executioner. Again, as I said a couple of days ago, I will not be the least bit surprised when we get to the bottom of this if Barr doesn't do a criminal referral on Uncle Bob and many members of his team for purposely misleading us in the Mueller report. That would be lying to Congress. That would be lying to the Attorney General. And that would be a gross abuse of power and obstruction on top of that. So there's probably a lot of charges there. I don't think Mueller's out of the woods yet, and that's why I'm really surprised that he's rocking the boat as much as he is. I expect when he goes and speaks to Congress, he's not going to answer very many questions, but I believe that he's going to mostly try to cover his butt. I don't think he's going to go try to cover the Democrats' butt. I think he's going to try to cover his own butt, and he needs to, because he's got a lot of problems. Lying is his biggest problem. Putting out a false report is an even bigger problem. And I think that that's exactly what he did. The Mueller report is a false report. It's flawed. Purposely flawed. So we were just talking about how dumb Ocasio-Cortez is. But let's not forget, she's got a lot of competition. A lot of competition. And I would say someone who I can think of who's equally as dumb as her, if not maybe a little dumber actually. He just doesn't talk as much as she does. And that would be Al Green. Many of you are familiar with Al Green. He's the Democrat congressman. I'm not sure where he's from. But Al Green, he's doing an interview on PMSNBC, and he literally says this. I swear, he literally says, quote, "If we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected." If we don't impeach his president, and he's dead serious, I mean, he's not joking at all. And you could tell that he's not fully understanding how what he's saying is going to be perceived by most people, because he's really serious. He's like, well, if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected. And it's like, that doesn't sound very good. What it sounds like is we have to impeach him, because if he doesn't, we're going to get reelected, which means, like, politically speaking, we have to take this guy down because we can't beat him. We can't beat him at the ballot box. He's going to win if we have to run against him. So we got to take him down because we can't beat him. It's essentially what he's saying. If we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected. That's Al Green for you. He's definitely challenging AOC for that dumbass of the week. So yesterday, as you know, I went off on pretty much of a rant. Some days I get very angry. Yesterday was about maybe as angry as I've ever been on any TowerGate video. It just builds at some point. Finally, you just explode. And that's kind of what happened with me yesterday. I just kind of exploded, man. At some point, it's like a pressure cooker, you get to the point where you just can't take it anymore. So I had to blow off a little steam. Probably pissed a few people off in the process, and maybe lost a few subs at the same time. But that's okay. They'll come back. So, anyway, I was talking yesterday and emphatically claiming that it's time to declassify everything, man. It's time to go, time to declassify. And so the Kentucky governor, Matt Bevin, it's funny, this morning I was on my break and I was just watching an interview he was doing, and he was making that point. He said, the president needs to declassify, declassify, declassify. And I'm like, I wonder if Matt Bevin watched my video yesterday. So yes, he does need to declassify, and they need to do it damn quick. It's time to put this thing to bed, man. It's time to put it to bed. Now, Comey, the dishonorable former director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, was on CBS this morning. I mean, this guy, I don't know if I've ever seen a character quite like Comey before. People talk about doctors a lot of times having a God complex. There's no question that Comey has a God complex, but his is more of like a moral complex. He sees himself as like the god of morality. And I actually almost believe, almost like OJ, I kind of think that Comey actually believes his own bullshit. I really am coming to this conclusion. Because I don't know how you could continue to go out there. I mean, doesn't he know how much trouble he's in? I mean, he's got to be, if not the first and the second one to be indicted. I mean, there's a lot of problems here. So he goes on CBS this morning and he says that the FBI doesn't spy. The FBI investigates. He's playing word games. He's playing word games. Spying is investigating. And he knows it. He knows exactly what they did. They definitely spied on the Trump campaign. You can call it anything you want. But when he gets in front of a grand jury, it's not going to matter. They're not going to care whether the word spy or investigate. They don't care what the word is. The bottom line, they're going to say, what was your probable cause to initiate your investigation, and when did you initiate it? And he's burnt. He's toast right there. Because the predicate for it was the dossier, and if there was anything else, we'd know it by now. And we know that there were things happening long before July 31st, 2016 that were going on long before they initiated the investigation, which means even using the dossier as the prerequisite is not going to fly, because that's exactly what they're going to say to him. Wait a minute, that can't be true because you had a lot of things going on before that. Are you saying that you were doing these things without an official investigation, in other words, illegally? He's trapped either way he goes. I don't see how Comey gets himself out of this trap, even with his Comey notes. So he says that we investigated a very serious allegation that Americans might be hooked up with the Russians' effort to attack our democracy. Go ahead and try that on a grand jury and a good prosecutor. I promise you they'll make you eat those words. Oh my goodness gracious. No, if anyone was attacking our democracy, it was you, Mr. Comey. And you're going to jail, period. No question in my mind. I'd bet my house on it. He says people ought to just look at the predication for the opening of the investigation. We should have been fired if we didn't investigate this. What, Trump in a Moscow hotel room being peed on by Russian prostitutes? That's something you might want to verify, don't you think? We have Saggy Daniels, who comes out and says that she don't know if Avenatti is any better than Trump. Very well done. And there's a rumor going around that the key question that Horowitz is asking FBI officials as he interviews them is this, and it's apparently a very good question. The question he's asking is, why did you cite Christopher Steele as credible in the spy warrant application for Trump campaign officials? Why did you cite Christopher Steele as credible in the spy warrant application for Trump campaign officials? That's Horowitz's question to a lot of these FBI people he's interviewing. That's a tough one, don't you think? Wait till we ask that to James Comey. See how that goes. See ya. Bye.